Hey guys, this is going to be my review of It's a Sin episode 2, the new Channel 4 HBO Max co-production, I think. And those of you who saw my review last week, you'll know I was really positive on the first episode. I really liked it. I really got into the characters and the drama and what was happening, and there was some subtle moments. So very, very good start, I thought, to this Russell T Davies drama, and I'm pleased to say it continues in the same vein. I thought this was a really strong episode as well. I think in some ways this episode was a bit more darker and a bit more tense just because it's now getting more into the disease, the virus and its effects. And once again I thought the character stuff was working really well in this episode because that's important in this sort of drama to really carry it along. So it sort of bounces around the characters in a way in this episode. You get like little bits from a few of them, but actually, I think the Jill character takes the main focus in this episode. Um, and the main plot with her is that she gets wind, she finds out that Gregory, as his kind of real name or his birth name is, but they know him as Gloria. Uh, She finds out that he's ill, that he's something's up with him, that he's being very sort of secretive about it. Sort of at one point he's described it as a certain thing, but we're meant to obviously cotton on to the fact that it's probably really the AIDS virus, and he gets Jill to get him like his shopping at one point and to help him out, but he wants her to do it in secret. He doesn't want her to tell the rest of the gang and for it to get out because he's worried. Like at one point he talks about Roscoe, his the guy he's been seeing because he's like, well, he'll just sort of blather it. He can't sort of help himself. He likes to gossip and stuff. So he's obviously concerned if it got out about the negative effects, which he can obviously understand. And so he like calls Jill up at her school, at her college. She's like at a class, and it's all very discreet. And he goes there and says, because I think it's like chlamydia or something, he says he might have. And there's this awkward sort of scene where he's like over on the other side of the room and he sort of tells her, but he's like also tells her to stay away from him and it assures her he's made sure he's like washed his hands and stuff like that. But that becomes the plot of the episode, that his condition gradually starts to get worse and it looks more and more like he has been infected by the virus and that before long he's probably going to die. And we get more of obviously the reaction to this virus and also this sort of this bigotry and hatred towards it, and the fact that I think it's obviously partly this idea of the unknown in a way, but it's also this thing about being quite snobby towards homosexual people, and the fact that it seems at least that it's mostly happening in them, but it's in a way it's just another excuse for straight people who are backwards in their way of thinking, in just another reason to discriminate against the homosexual community. So we see at one point Gregory slash Gloria's father and sister come for a visit, and they're just there one time when Jill comes by with the shopping or something, and they're really like standoffish with her and says he's not I think he's meant to be there, or they sort of say he's upstairs, or something like that. I can't quite remember, but it's a very sort of cold vibe, and they're very like off with Jill and very critical of her, and just saying, he's our thing now. And I think they're just acting all very like paranoid about this idea, and basically just that they're very ashamed with him because of, you know, again, bigotry and bias. Well, rather than obviously showing him the love and support, they're very upset over it and like very sort of kind of snobby. They just say to Jill, "Well, we're taking him home to, I think it's Glasgow, somewhere in Scotland anyway, and we'll take care of it now." And they say to her, "You can leave now. Don't say anything to anyone." And so we get that whole thing, and I think again this is what this drama has been doing well, is then it can, because you get the scenes with the gang hanging out and different things happening in their lives, but there are lighter moments, and certainly when you see them out clubbing and having a good time, that there's some humour and some lighter moments, but it does a very good job of nailing the more dramatic, the more darker sort of scenes when it needs to. And I think sometimes it is that contrast between them which really sort of nails the power of those other scenes, because what this episode leads to is at the end that he dies. Gregory dies back home, and I think Jill doesn't even get to say goodbye to him. Not properly. What happens is that she's writing him letters, sort of on a regular basis, every month, sort of thing, and she eventually says, well, she doesn't say the full truth to Roscoe and the others. She just says then his family came to take him home, and the impression they have is that, certainly Roscoe, is that he just couldn't hack it. He couldn't hack being openly gay in London and stuff, and that's why he decided to come home, and he's just letting his family like sort of take control and stuff like that. So there's that side to it, but Jill's like writing Gregory letters, to try and, I think, to check on him, but to also like stay in touch and show her support. And I think this episode, even more than the first episode, makes you really like Jill. That she's a really like sweet, down to earth sort of character who's very sensitive to this thing. So she's writing him letters back and forth, and she's also, because a big thing with her in this episode is that she's getting information about this, the AIDS virus. And at one point, because Colin's like big plot in this episode is that he goes up to work, like on a work trip in New York, and because Jill sort of hears that in America, in New York, there's more information out there about AIDS, that they're being a bit more freer, a bit more sort of transparent than there are actually like magazines on it and stuff, and newspapers and stuff. So she asks Collins at one point to get some to go to, like, she gives him a list of bookshops to go and get information, which he does. And so Jill, throughout the episode, is trying to learn more and try to get more information, partly for Gregory. So she's writing him these letters, but what happens is at the end, when he's died, his father particularly, who's like really aggressive, just sort of disowns him and almost his memory, because what they do is they have a bonfire with all his stuff, and that they just set it on fire, including Jill's letters, because obviously when Gregory's gone, they find the letters, I guess, and they just put it all on the bomb. And it's actually a really shocking, heartbreaking moment that they would do that. And we see his mother, who's like really emotional and upset. So I think I got the impression that she wasn't willingly going along with that, but just then the father was a bit, yeah, kind of dominant and just this is the way it's going to be. And yeah, so to cut to that with the contrast of the others in London was really shocking and powerful and just really sad. I think it really gets across how kind of nasty sort of bigotry and misunderstanding can be, and kind of tragic, really. But I think it's a really good character beat for Jill in this episode that she is trying to get this information, and I think it also captures the mood at the time. This kind of it's this idea of it's the not knowing and not having information about something which is growing fast and is kind of fatal. That's more scary. So I think you can kind of link it to what's been going on with the virus in the last year or so, because obviously not every government was transparent over it. Certainly not at first. He's looking at our government, but yeah, it's this stuff about. I think if you suppress it, if you try to, you know, close down information about it, close down dialogue about it, and you're not open about it with the public, then it just makes things worse. It just sort of feeds into the paranoia. So it's kind of an interesting look at the contrast, like in 80s New York being a much more open, liberal sort of place and actually maybe discussing these things, like in contrast with maybe a bit more stiff upper lip, sort of like Britain. I know that's a stereotype, so but certainly in this episode, there's that sort of suggestion, um, and obviously it's New York in particular, so I don't know if it would be the same. You can imagine in some of the southern American states they maybe wouldn't be so open about it, but it's certainly quite interesting, and I thought that was quite a striking thing for them to be saying that. Yeah, if you suppress this thing, if you try to put it in the margins and you're not open and transparent about it, it's probably going to make things worse. And I think one thing this episode shows as well is like the divisions that can be caused, because we start to see some tension in the group itself with Jill and the others. As I said, Roscoe becomes a bit sort of dismissive and a bit sort of, whatever about Gregory. That's no, he kind of chickened out and stuff. Rather than being concerned about him, he takes that view. And there's also a disagreement at one point with Richie and Drill, which is sort of interesting because they kind of bookend the episode in a way, because we see them up on stage performing in a club in the first half, and it's still over the Christmas holiday, so she's been staying with his family, and they're still under the impression that they're boyfriend and girlfriend because Richie still hasn't told them about his sexuality, and there's a funny little, chat between the Kiri Hall's playing the mother and between Jill, where she's trying to get Jill to say that, go on, I know you two are together, and Jill saying, no, we're really not. But there's this thing where they're up on stage and they're performing together, and we see them perform, I think, a few different times. And it's mentioned that it's something to do with to get into like a prestigious, because obviously Richie wants to be an actor, so to get into like this prestigious, I think, drama school or something, he has to get so many performances under his belt, sort of thing, and that's a way to kind of get into like the academy or whatever it's meant to be. And um, it sort of mentions some like political stuff at the time, like something it sort of brings in the unions, and that there was something to do with Thatcher about her trying to like wipe out the unions, but it was connected to what they were saying about the drama stuff, which no, it sort of went a bit over my head. I mean, maybe people, if you know exactly what they were talking about, you can say in the comments. Um, but that's why they're doing it. You know, they need to build up these performances, I guess, on the CV so they can impress this academy and get in. And we find out later in the episode that Richie's finally got in, but we see them performing on stage. And there's also more of a dispute between Richie and his father because Richie's father again isn't very supportive of the whole like arts profession, if as a profession, you know, being an actor and stuff. But yeah, there is some friction between Richie and Jill in this episode because of his more casual, blasé attitude to the AIDS. I mean, in this episode, Richie really comes out and just says that no, I think it's basically it's a conspiracy theory against you know homosexual. It's you know oh it's so convenient the fact that it only seems to be gay and there's this really kind of funny you know flashy sort of scene where they're like walking to the club and he's going for this whole dialogue about all the conspiracy theories and that they blame it on the Russians. So you get the whole Cold War. They blame it on people who have come from places that begin with H, like Hull and stuff. And it's one of these very sort of ironic, flashy sort of scenes. And it sort of ends with Richie just going on the dance floor and just kissing different people and dance. And that's kind of his whole message that he's like, no, this is just them trying to keep us down and fuck it, I'm gonna have a good time and stuff. And yeah, because I'm smart basically. And it's a good scene, but it pays off like more later when you see what happens with him and Jill because again Richie's kind of being dismissive of it when they're talking about it and Jill just like comes down on him but actually in quite a nice way. She doesn't do it in like a harsh way. She is very she's like sensitive with it. She just basically says sometimes Richie you're just too clever by half. You're sort of more clever than you think you are. And she lays it on the line for him. She basically says, well, maybe you guys shouldn't have sex so much because if there is this disease out there and if it's being proven that it you know it comes from having unprotected sex and that is coming from homosexual unprotected sex, then there's basically a chance that if you continue to have all this sex, then there's always that possibility that it could happen to you. And yeah, she just lays it on mind, but it's quite sort of nice and puts it in a sort of a friendly sort of way as much as she can. That you just need to smart up, and she gives him a kiss on the head and says goodnight and stuff. And I think what it's getting at in this episode is first of all that it really paints Drill in a good sort of light, but the other thing about it is that I think it it's a show that isn't afraid to like sort of be a bit murky with its characters. It would be too easy for it just to be completely on the side of like the central characters all the time. That it would just you know be on their side and they're right all the time and stuff. But it does show a bit of complexity, a bit of light and dark, and that maybe Richie and the rest. More so Richie in a way because he's the one who's coming out with it and actually being a bit aggressive and a little bit naive, I guess, than he is in this example. He's like too flawed. He's flawed and he's too willing to believe that, oh, it's all this conspiracy theory without finding out for yourself. Um, and we do see a little bit of that with, obviously, as I said, with Roscoe maybe being a bit dismissive and being certainly not being very sensitive when it came to Gregory. I mean, obviously, he didn't know the full story. If he did, I'm sure he would have been um, more concerned. But in any case, it certainly played in the episode that he was a bit kind of snobby about him and, dismissed him too easily. But we're getting a sense of light and dark. Not everything's black and white in the group. But by the end, there is this sort of divide because you get these people who have been handing out flyers in the local pub about AIDS, and what happens is at the end, Jill goes and sits with them, and she's actually talking to them. And earlier in the episode, Richie has actually again been very anti them, and sort of claimed that in a way they're just homophobic and that's their whole issue. So when he sees Jill talking to them, he's actually kind of pissed. He's like, oh well, what's her deal? Why is she sitting with them, sort of thing. So we see this sort of division in the group a little bit, and it's not so much from Jill's point of view because she's just naturally going to sit with these guys who she's gotten to know and she quite likes hanging out with, and obviously she now has this interest in getting more information about the AIDS, but at the same time she wasn't doing it to spite Richie. It's just she went naturally to talk to them, have a drink with them. But so you can see that there might be more of that in the coming episodes, with a bit of division in the group. As I said, Colin went to New York in the episode, and his thing over there is that he's pressured by his boss, who we find out also is a homosexual. He pressures Colin to have sex with him. Basically, they're obviously in the same hotel, and he propositions him at one point. And I mean, what sort of freaks him out is that Colin has a magazine. He has one of the magazines which Jill asked him to get, and on the front cover, it's the headline story is about AIDS, so that kind of makes him back off. But what happens is that later on, when they get back to London, it's Colin is told that he's fired, or I mean, not in those words. The way it's put to him is that his internship has now finished and that they won't be taking him on after it, that there's no jobs or anything like that. So, again, definitely it appears as though, yeah, it's because he didn't sleep with the boss, that, yeah, he's not going to get that. And it's again a very kind of harsh sort of scene because the boss is over it. He's in the same room. He's over on another table and just at his desk and writing stuff, and he can overhear it because it's another higher up sort of talking to Colin and telling him this, and the boss just isn't looking at him. He's at this point, I don't think he is the boss, or maybe that was later because I think he also sort of, I can't remember to be honest if he gets like demoted or not. But I don't think he does actually. But yeah, it's a whole thing with Colin sort of losing, not getting taken on after the internship because of what happened and the fact that he didn't sleep with his boss, essentially. It seems to be, and he loses that job, so needs to get another job. The big plot with Roscoe in the episode, apart from what his stuff with Gregory sort of thing and his sort of attitude towards that, is that Roscoe, his sister has had a baby. She's gotten married, had a baby, and he shows up. I think it's to the red wedding. It's him and Gregory's there with him, and they have to watch from the car because obviously the family's not going to let them in, and it's just this sort of moment, them sitting in the car watching, and later the sister comes round because again she can't, it's not like Roscoe can come over, but she brings the baby round, but we also find out that she's kind of, in the father's eyes, sort of disgraced because he was against her getting married, getting pregnant, basically. But I'm guessing more so the baby. It's not part of like their religious beliefs. So it's kind of like both children are kind of, you know, I hate to use it, but sort of dead to him, really. And she says at one point he's gone back to our own. I forget which country it was now, but he's gone back home. That it's just too much for him. It's dealing with you coming out and now me and Roscoe quite rightly stands up for, says, well, so it's our fault, is it? And again, he says it in quite a harsh way. It's almost like I sort of hope he dies, really, has a heart attack. And obviously the sister's more concerned than that. But that's another sort of plot, another continues on from last week and what we saw with Roscoe and his family. But that's the episode pretty much. And again, I thought it was really strong. So this already is shaping up to be one of the best TV shows of the year, even though it's quite early. Really good stuff. And so I'll be back next week with another It's a Sim review of episode 3. If you've been watching along, then let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. Also, if you are new to the channel, then please like and subscribe. In fact, there should be like an icon in that corner there, which you'll be able to click on, and it'll like subscribe you to the channel if you want to see more content. Can also use the bell on YouTube, ding the bell if you want like notifications when I go live with a live stream, and also when when a new video comes up. So, but thanks for listening. I'll be back soon. Take care. Goodbye.